Oh, what's up, everyone? It's your friend Joseph Craven here on 40 Minutes of Hell. That's right. It's the playoffs, and so I'm actually recording a podcast. I actually found some time to do it, and I figured I might as well get it done. I've built this incredible brand new PC from scratch. I don't know. Is that the thing people say? I don't know. I built this thing. It's a multitasking monstrosity. It's sitting in my home office, and I'm loving it. And I'm going to try to take advantage of it by actually recording something on the old podcast that I bet all of you thought had just gone ahead and died. Well, it hasn't, even though maybe it should have. Maybe flying a little bit more solo than I'd like, but that's okay. I still got some thoughts. I still got my co-host, Radar O'Reilly. That's my dog. She ain't saying anything. She's probably laying out in the sunshine right now, actually. But the playoffs are happening right now. As we speak, we have entered into the second round. It's been interesting. It's been obviously much better in the second round so far. More entertaining games, more entertaining storylines. That's just how it is. The NBA playoffs, I mean, you don't get anything interesting in the first round anyway, most of the time, unless you have like a major upset. A lot of times it's okay, the teams that did really well during the regular season to secure those top spots, well, they're going to go ahead and get their victories, get their sweeps, whatever. You had New Orleans beating Portland last season, which made for one of the more interesting storylines because it was unexpected. It was not supposed to happen, and then boy, when it happened hard. And that'll lead me to one of the talking points I'll have on this episode of 40 Minutes of Hell later on. 40 Minutes of Hell, of course, being the approximate length of the episode and also a proper description of what it feels like to have to listen to me talk about basketball for this long. Right now, on the series, as of recording this on an early Tuesday afternoon, you have Boston up 1-0 on the Bucks with that 112-90, even more dominant victory really than the scoreline shows. I believe the next game will be happening tonight, so we'll have more to say about that series as it goes. I'm not overreacting to the way that Milwaukee looked, but I do think it says a lot about Boston, and I'll get to that in just a little bit later on. Along with that, later on today, as of recording, we'll have Game 2 between what will be a very, very interesting Rockets and Warriors series. Super pumped about that. But the 76ers and the Raptors have their series. They're 2 games in. They're tied up 1-1. Because it went to Game 7 in the first round, because Denver went to Game 7 in the first round, Denver and Portland just now had their first game this week, with the Nuggets pulling out a 121-113 victory over the Trailblazers. Let's talk a little bit about, let me say one thing to lead all of this off, because I like to pride myself on being... I was about to say I pride myself in being humble enough. That's not a great thing to say, but I do like to make it a point when I'm like super wrong about something to revisit it. And I don't know if I really ever said this on the podcast. I feel like I did. I know I said it to friends when everything went down, when it all happened. But I'm pretty sure I said on the podcast that I really felt like the Raptors going after Kawhi Leonard was going to backfire. And I was super wrong about that. I did not anticipate, and maybe I should have understood, that Kawhi was the type of guy who would jump up, rise to the occasion, be a leader on the team that needed a leader. I felt going into it maybe that he was establishing more weird diva tendencies, or maybe was starting to become more and more of a crazy person based on the rumors and the stories coming out of San Antonio with the injury and him avoiding the team and not wanting to talk to people. He's just an awkward man, though. We see that now in basically every interaction he has with anybody. He's just awkward. This is going to sound super strange, but his mouth kind of freaks me out a little bit. There's something about it. I don't know if he just has like weirdly, like, I don't know, a weird way of kind of talking or something. Or maybe it's the fact that he's such a deadpan looking guy that whenever he smiles or something, it just seems unnatural. But then again, we also have no proof that he is not actually a synth created by the Institute. I love Kawhi Leonard, though. I like him. I know that Toronto lost to the 76ers in Game 2. I know that they weren't quite the same, but I do think that there's something really, really positive going on in Toronto. Obviously, they really have to focus on keeping Kawhi Leonard there in order for this success. They took a big gamble getting rid of DeMar DeRozan to get Kawhi Leonard. They have to focus on trying to keep him in Toronto, which, I mean, it has to seem appealing, right? First of all, Toronto's a great city. I've had the pleasure of being there a few times and really like the city of Toronto itself. There's a lot going on. It's very big without necessarily feeling like overwhelming, and maybe the only real negatives about it are the high cost of living, but that doesn't matter that much when you're making NBA money. Now, does it? But I thought at the time that the trade happened that losing DeMar DeRozan would really disrupt the chemistry of the Toronto Raptors quite a bit. That was my working theory, is that Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan had become the backbone of that organization to the point where mixing it up, even if you got somebody that was as supremely talented as Kawhi Leonard is, that maybe it would throw things off tremendously. Now, where I was proven insanely wrong is the belief that Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan were like that massively important to the foundation, that they were the backbone. They were the backbone, yes, at the time. That backbone has shifted to become Kawhi Leonard and Spicy P himself, Pascal Siakam. That is becoming the like Kyle Lowry is becoming not the leader. It's more of a transition than I thought it would be. He's becoming not as much of the leader for the Raptors. Not as much of the central nervous system of the Raptors like it was under DeRozan and Lowry, who kind of developed together a little bit. I know Lowry had his Houston years that really turned him into one of the better point guards in the NBA, but when he got to Toronto was when he really became a star at the position, and Toronto took advantage of that. As it turns out, it really seems like Kawhi Leonard kind of took on the responsibility, bought into the role that he was being brought in to play there for the Raptors, took the responsibility, and has risen to the occasion. And I didn't anticipate that happening because of his personality. I didn't anticipate him having what the great Bill Simmons would have referred to as like an FU season. The players that typically have a season in which they're like, hey, you know what, F you, I'm going to succeed even though I probably shouldn't. Those tended to be stronger personalities than Kawhi Leonard. And so this is one of the more unique situations I've seen where normally you have a more vocal player who has an FU type of year. Russ Westbrook averaging a triple-double is like the quintessential FU season. Because everyone said, okay, well, that KD was maybe the heart and soul of that team. Can Russ really carry a team? And Russ's response was, you know what, F you. I can handle this. I'm going to do something that hasn't been done since the great Oscar Robertson, someone who I believe gets criminally overlooked in like the all-time greats. Hit the history books of all-time greats or whatever. Normally, the FU season comes from a more vocal player, but we're seeing it happen from a guy who is not known for being vocal, and it's maybe the most pure and wonderful manifestation of an FU season that I've ever seen was the ability of Kawhi Leonard to say, okay, I don't want to be here. I did not want to be in Toronto. I wanted to go to LA. I wanted to become a Laker and team up with LeBron James. Which, side note, if I'm super wrong about the Raptors, I was super right about the Lakers. I just have to point that out. But Kawhi said, I don't want to be here. I didn't want to come here. There were talks of like, would he even like play? Would he just kind of sit out and like save a year of NBA eligibility or whatever it is in NBA redshirt, and then make a push to go join the Lakers after that? He embraced being in Toronto. He embraced becoming the man on the team, and it makes sense. In a lot of ways, he is the next level up from DeMar DeRozan. Similar heights, obviously, similar athleticism. Although you got to give DeMar DeRozan the edge, I think, in just like pure athleticism. But in talent wise, Kawhi he's constantly getting better. He's developing a more consistent shot, and he's becoming a better scorer. Can create for himself. And along with that, and it really was shown in Game 1 of this second round series. He moves so well, like without the ball, and DeMar does not do that as much. I think one of the major differences between Kawhi Leonard and DeMar DeRozan, besides the obvious in defensive lockdown ability, is Kawhi's ability to move without the ball, the IQ of being able to do what he does when he is not in possession of the ball to make the team better. And DeMar kind of needs it a little bit more to create for himself. I really like DeMar DeRozan, and I really thought the Spurs were going to be able to pull off that Game 7 victory over the Nuggets. But obviously did not happen that way. A lot can be said and a lot has been said about what happened at the end of Game 7 and the not fouling when they should have, blah, blah, blah. If you have a chance to go listen to a recent episode of Heat Check on the Ringer basketball podcast, Shea Serrano shows up in there, and I'm going to pay close attention to anything Shea Serrano does for the most part. I like his style. I don't often fully agree with him on things, but he does it. He states what he's going to state so well that it's hard to disagree, or it's hard to not appreciate his tonality and what he's going for. In particular, I tend to disagree with him though on his hip hop suggestions. If you've ever read his book about rap music. Anyway, all that to say, Shea Serrano does a good job of summing up as a Spurs fan how they feel about the series and like the season as a whole and how it was a successful season, and coming up on the end of the tail end of the Popovich Spurs dynasty. Maybe the most impressive run in NBA history, considering what he's been able to do over the course of the past 20 years since he took over in 1999. I'm sorry, since that title in 1999, he took over in 95 or 96, whatever it was. I forget, but anyway, Shea Serrano does a good job summing that up. I'm not going to, hit on the Spurs anymore here, but I really like DeMar DeRozan, and I think that DeMar and LaMarcus and what they're building in San Antonio around those two as they're getting older is good and will have some success. Hopefully I'll be able to get some 40 Minutes of Hell contributors, Ro Hunter and Jim Strickland, aka Jimmer on Twitch, to join in on a discussion, because I have questions about the future of the Spurs and the future of an organization that has been built not really on stars, but built more so on a system. So stay tuned. Hopefully can get that discussion going very, very soon here on the Old Basketball Podcast. Let's jump over to the Western Conference real quick and talk about somebody who I feel like is kind of in the same vein in having an FU type of performance like Kawhi Leonard had been doing. And that, of course, is the legend that is building, at least the currently developing legend of Dame Lillard. I've always liked Damian Lillard, and in particular, I've felt like for the better part of the season at least, he has developed into possibly the best fourth quarter player in the NBA. And I know that's quite a claim, all right, to say somebody is the best fourth quarter player, but just look at what he did against OKC, and in particular, look at that series winning shot that he put up, where he had no problem at all launching one from 35, 36, 400 feet away. I mean, put it up from, I want to say from Seattle itself into Portland. It was that far away. I like Dame Lillard, and in particular, I think this is an important narrative to explore with the Trailblazers in general, because the Blazers roster is I don't feel like it's terribly different than it was last season. Could be wrong on that. I'm gonna look up a side by side comparison real quick on the greatest website known to man, basketballreference.com. I feel like it's not terribly different. I'm going to just look real quick. I mean, you got Dame, CJ, Al Farouk, Evan Turner, Jake Layman, Miles Leonard. Sky Labissiere. What a terrible player he is. Mo Harkless. You do have Mo Harkless involved there. And obviously, Joseph is more of a complete player now than he was. But no, I mean, it's largely the same. Pat Connaughton's gone. Ed Davis is gone. No one significant is gone. Pretty much the same rotation is involved, but they've grown, and you can see that they have grown. Rodney Hood's there from Meridian, Mississippi. You could see that they've grown, and I think that is very, very significant considering the way that they went out in the playoffs last year. Obviously, massive disappointment for them to be as favored as they were, and then not just lose, but to just completely be a non-factor in a sweep as the favored team. Losing those games. Let's see. First one was 97-95, so it's a close one, okay? Next one, 111 to 102, fairly close, but then 119 to 102 in game 3, the lead, growing there. And then that wild game 4 ended up 131 to 123. I was watching that one with 40 Minutes of Hell contributors, Jim Strickland and Ro Hunter. We recorded an episode at that point in time as well as watching that one. That was fun. I guess you have some additions such as Enes Kanter, for example, stepping up some when Jusuf Nurkic got hurt. You've got the Rodney Hood addition, you got the Seth Curry addition, but the core of this team is just more experienced, and they have put together a more complete, okay or bad type of season, right? They basically were like, okay, we were a massive disappointment in the playoffs last year. We got swept by a team that we were heavily favored to defeat. That's on us, and we have to do better than this. We have to, we have to rise above this. We have to correct the mistakes. And they did that by beating OKC, a pesky OKC team, kind of a reinvigorated OKC team for most of the season, especially with Paul George putting together a almost MVP-esque season. Let's not overlook that. Lost in the narrative of whether Russell Westbrook is, past his prime, washed up, uncoachable, whatever the narrative is in OKC. We'll do an entire episode about what their future might entail. Despite all of that, that's still a good team, and that's still a playoff team, and that's still a team that has at least two of the best players, most talented players in the NBA on there, and the Trailblazers able to shut them down, to silence them, to exorcise the demons of last season. That's huge. And I get that they lost in the first game against the Nuggets. Okay, that's fine. The Nuggets themselves are a tricky team. They've gotten probably the best, pure big man in the NBA right now, in Jokic, Nikola Jokic, and I do mean that in terms of the best pure big man. I don't think he is the best overall big man in the NBA, but he's probably the best pure, true big man. And his vision's outstanding. Anyway. I feel like that could be an entire episode in and of itself. But the Trailblazers put together, even if they lose against the Nuggets, the Nuggets were leading the West for most of the season. They're still the number 2 seed in the Western Conference. It's a good team. it's a good team. If you're going to lose, it could be a good series. I mean, being a second round playoff team is a good accomplishment. And obviously, it is a step up from where Portland was at this time last season when they had, bombed out pretty significantly and were not a second round team. I think it's good building blocks. It shows that the growth and the experience of the team, and it shows that maybe some guys that want to go out and don't want to like ring chase, but feel like they've paid their dues and want to end up on a better team. They look at that younger nucleus of Dame Lillard, C.J. McCollum, Yusuf Nurkic. They look at them and say, okay, yes. Those are the guys that I want to, go over to. I want to, help win more games, make a playoff. But yeah, those are the guys that I want to be around because that is now a winning team with a winning mentality. It's very significant. I don't think you can understate how significant that has been for Portland to bounce back from where they were at this time last year. And you see it not just in the performance itself, but in the confidence. I mean, CJ saying that he was able to go and watch his brother play in Europe, I believe. But he called him before the playoffs set and said, hey, man, I'm not going to be able to make it this year. I mean, that's awesome. I love that. I love seeing that development of those guys because, like, Lillard and McCollum are very likable players unless you're Kevin Durant and you don't like anybody. And so I enjoy seeing them succeed like that. A lot of fun there. And I think that's a big-time FU rebound performance out of Lillard and the Trailblazers to do what they're able to do so far in the playoffs. We'll see how that Nuggets? Wow, that's interesting. I guess that's a combination of nuggets and buckets. I like that now. Whenever the Nuggets are on a hot streak and scoring a bunch, we should start talking about them getting nuggets. Anyway, that series I think will be a very, very fascinating one to watch. I don't look at any of these series and think, I'll skip that one. These are some great matchups. I love it so much. Staying in the West for a second, a lot is being read way too deeply into the playoff start of the Golden State Warriors, how the Clippers were able to push them, how they are now matched up against the Rockets, who despite the record, despite the placement in the seeding on the Western Conference, maybe people still think are one of the top two best teams in the Western Conference. Okay, I feel like we're reading too deeply into that. I want to stress that fact. This just seems like it's a little too much because this is still a supremely talented team. And one thing I don't understand about this, before I get into the rest of it, one thing I don't understand is when people were just like, I think they're just being really impacted by the fact that they lost DeMarcus Cousins to injury. No, they didn't. They don't care about that. They played most of the season without Boogie Cousins. They've won everything up until this season without Boogie Cousins. And when Boogie Cousins came in, they actually, if you look at some of the advanced statistics, were like a worse team on the court in a lot of areas with him on the court. I don't want to hear anything about the Warriors missing Boogie Cousins because they don't. They don't miss him, all right? He is not a significant piece. Is he a benefit? Sure, he's very talented. I don't know if he'll ever fully recover from the injury that he has, but he's an extremely talented player. He is not a cornerstone player of that organization. I'll be honest with you, Kevin Durant is not really a cornerstone player in that organization. The cornerstone players of the organization are the Splash Brothers and Draymond. The team was built on that. The team won without Kevin Durant, The team won with that foundation of the Splash Bros and Draymond doing what they're doing. In fact, that was a system that worked out very, very, very well. Like, they had a lot of players that they found who fit their style of play, fit their system well enough to add on to this. I mean, just look at old Swaggy P, right? Nick Young. Like, there's no way Nick Young is a super useful player to any other franchise at that point in time than being plugged into the Warriors system like he is. Sean Livingston is the perfect piece for the Warriors. You put Sean Livingston on another team and he does not do what he does, for the Golden State Warriors, like he did in the past, in those championship runs, those championship seasons, and all of that. I think that's significant. Kevin Durant, oh gosh, it must have also been on one of the Ringer podcasts. It might have actually been on the Low Post by Zach Lowe that I was listening to not long ago, where he made he talked about the description of how Kevin Durant is okay, we don't really have anything going. I call him a spark plug player. He used different terminology, but that's Kevin Durant's role on this team. Kevin Durant's role on the team is, okay, maybe we're kind of stagnating just a little bit. Let's get, some insta points, right? Let's get something going. Let's get a little bit of motivation. That's what Kevin Durant's role on the Warriors is. He's not a centerpiece of the team. The team flows through Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green. It does not flow through Kevin Durant. And if they lost Kevin Durant, they would still be an incredibly good basketball team. All right? They just would. Kevin Durant, you could say all you want about defending his choice to go over and get a ring there or whatever it may be. But he went to a team in which he did not have to be the guy, and he doesn't have to be the guy now. All he has to be for them now is a spark plug to get some production going. And when the system is not working, he's the fallback plan, right? And maybe that is an example of how he is such a dominant force, and he is one of the best players in the world, bar none. There's no questioning any of that. And maybe that's a testament to how good he is in that regard. I don't know. I don't love it, though. And I feel like that's one of those things where maybe we're reading a little too deeply into when we talk about, some of their struggles. I mean, the system is run through those three players, those three original Warriors, those OG Warriors who were drafted into the organization. And as they're getting older, a little bit more injured in case of Steph and having some of those, knee and ankle injuries that he has been kind of prone to have. And as there's, presumed rifts, as there have been between Draymond and KD over the course of the season, whatever. As you do have some of those issues, is when I think you see the Warriors struggle just a little bit. It's their system and it's their core. It is not missing Boogie Cousins. He does not matter that much to the organization. It is, nothing to do. KD has been carrying them through that, and I think that's significant. That's why they brought him in. But if he were to leave after this season, I think the Warriors are still really, really good. Also, the Clippers are just a bad matchup for him. And we'll talk about that more in just a second. But the major thing in my observations, my opinion, which, obviously doesn't really mean anything. My observation is that the Clippers were a bad matchup for a team that is trying to win a third championship in a row. And that's hard to do. It's mentally hard to do a back-to-back. It's almost mentally impossible to do a three in a row. Let's see. I'm just going to, again, you can probably hear my keyboard clicking as I try to go through and look at the NBA champions in the past, because I'm trying to remember the last year. Yeah, it was 2000 to 2002 with those incredible Lakers teams. Those were the last times that you had saw someone win three in a row. Bulls 96 to 98, 91 to 93. But even before that, Detroit got a back-to-back 1990 and 89. The Lakers back-to-back in 88, 87. Oh man. You don't even have another back-to-back until you jump back to the 60s. Is that right? Am I looking at that right? That's crazy to me that you didn't have back-to-back champions for almost 20 years. 68 and 69, the Boston Celtics won the title. And then you didn't have a back-to-back again until 87 and 88. So there was almost 2 decades where you did not have back-to-back NBA champions. You have to go back to the absurd 59 to 66 run with the Celtics where they won, 8 in a row. It's just so stupid. I love it. In order to find another 3 in a row championship, victory there. And then all the way back to the 50s with the Minneapolis St. Paul Lakers. 52, 53, and 54, they won 3 in a row over the New York Knicks and the Syracuse Nationals. So what is that? That's the mini Lakers, the Boston Celtics with that absurd 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in a row. That absurd 59-66. Uh, it just doesn't seem right when I say it out loud. 59-66 is 8 in a row, but it is. For some reason, my math is not, or my brain's not comprehending the math. The Chicago Bulls twice, the Lakers. That's only 5 different times that we've had a 3 in a row champion. All right. The unbelievable Miami Heat struggled to do it and were not able to and got beat 4-1 by the San Antonio Spurs in 2014. The Los Angeles Lakers of 09 and 2010 were not able to even make the finals in 2011. Before that, before that is when you get to the most recent, the last team to win 3 in a row. It's just almost impossible to win 3 in a row, and I think that's why before the playoffs started, I did not predict, and I would not predict another Warriors championship because it's just almost impossible to do. I think they maybe make the finals, but I feel like we're gonna see Houston or Denver make the finals. But I feel like it's gonna be the team from the East that wins it this year, and that team in particular, I think is going to be, believe it or not, the 4 seed Boston Celtics. I know they were not great throughout most of the year. You know, they had some struggles at times. They're hitting a stride right now, Boston. And what's working for Boston as of right now, I believe, or what you're seeing out of guys like, let's just say Aaron Baines counts in this, but mostly Gordon Hayward and Al Horford. I think these are 2 guys in particular that are the reasons why you're going to see a lot more success out of the Boston Celtics. Kyrie Irving also being like the third part of that. But Kyrie Irving is obviously, he's supposed to be like the leader and the star on the Boston Celtics. I do think that there is still that aspect of where it is his team. Despite the fact that maybe Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are more talented players than what we see, especially with Hayward and Horford. But there's a reason why they went after Horford in free agency a couple years ago. I mean, Al Horford is one of the best big men in the NBA, even still at the age of, what is he now, 33? Yeah, I think or about to turn 33 on June 3rd. Hey, happy future birthday to you, Al. But they've got these guys. Those are experienced winners. They're more veteran players than Tatum and Brown, but they also happen to be players that are turning it on more in the playoffs. You got Hayward playing more of a like forward and in the post sort of position than he's really ever played at any point in his career. And I know he's only pulling in, less than 12 points per game on the season, which is not great. When he had been in his last few healthy seasons in Utah, or I guess his last few healthy seasons when he was in Utah. There we go. That's the complete train of thought. Good grief. He was averaging at least about 20, almost 22 points a game. Probably not going to see him return to that because that's also not the role that he's supposed to be playing either. But if you look at what he's doing in the playoffs right now, he's making good plays and he's doing a lot of things that really bring relief to the inexperienced in the playoff players like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And Boston right now is kind of more loaded up on players that probably are better at potentially making a playoff run than you would find in other teams in the Eastern Conference. The major caveat to that would be a team that I did an episode about when it came to one of the more unique constructions of a team, and one of the more unique, just one of the more unique teams in general. I mean, first and foremost, but the team that they're going up against, who Boston was able to manhandle in Game 1. That's Al Horford, of course, who did that. In particular, he really was surprising. And by the time this episode is released, that game's going to be going. By the time it's done, we'll have a lot more of a grasp on how this series could go. But the Bucks are the other team that, in particular, you look at their roster and you see depth there. You see a unique. I mean, come on, they've got Nikola Mirotic, who had a phenomenal season for New Orleans a year ago and has not been like that big of a player, but they traded for him for a reason. They brought in Eric Bledsoe last season. They have. I just love the fact that Pau Gasol's on their roster. I always forget that Pau Gasol is there, but I mean they've got George Hill for a reason, and Chris Middleton and Giannis are coming off All-Star seasons, right? You've got two teams here in this particular lineup or in this particular matchup that have depth, but also have players that I feel like can turn it on in the playoffs themselves. Now, Boston has the edge there because Milwaukee, for as good as they are, they just don't have enough of that experience in there as far as the playoffs go. I mean, Brook Lopez, a heck of a veteran, but I mean, what's his playoff resume? Not necessarily as strong. I've already mentioned that Mirotic, of course, had the night. He was a part of that, a key player in that sweep of the Trailblazers this time last year by the Pellies. George Hill, another veteran player, but compared to the type of play that the Celtics are getting out of some of their bench players, I mean, to have Terry Rozier come in and have, put in some key minutes there. Aaron Baines, who I mentioned earlier, putting in some real key minutes. I think that Boston just has a real solid playoff roster going on here. Milwaukee's good. Milwaukee's really good. Milwaukee was the 1 seed in the East for a reason. Milwaukee has the future of the NBA in Giannis Antetokounmpo. A probable MVP for a reason there in the season he has had. There's just not much of the playoff experience. There's not as much of the experience itself there. Eric Bledsoe is, in Game 1 at least, was not really showing enough of what they needed out of a guy who's supposed to be more of a leader on that team as well. I feel like if I had to make a prediction, which I hate doing anyway, but I feel like if I had to make a prediction, I would say that the winner of this series goes on to win the East and the NBA championship between the Bucks and the Celtics. I know that sounds ridiculous, knowing how good that series is between the 76ers and the Raptors, but I mean, this is where I'm feeling like the 76ers and Raptors are going to beat each other up a little too much. Perhaps. I don't know. I could be very, very wrong, and I was wrong on the Raptors at the beginning of the season. There's a solid chance that I'm wrong on the Raptors right now. But I feel like this is the winner of the Bucks Celtics who goes on to take the East and eventually the NBA championship, possibly, depending on who it is that comes out of the West. Because if it's Houston, you might see an Eastern champion or a Western champion. I don't know. We'll talk about that more and as we get to that point in the season. But I just feel like the Bucks Celtics series is the series to keep a little bit closer eye on in the NBA or in the Eastern Conference of the NBA right now. That being said, 76ers and Raptors looking real fascinating. Will the winner of that series be too beat up in order to make a run or a more of a run through the rest of the East? Not the west of the East, the rest of the East, and make it to the finals? I don't think they do. I think it's the Bucks Celtics winner who makes it to the finals. We'll just have to find out whether I'm right, whether I'm wrong there. Chances are, of course, that I'm super wrong because What do I know about any of this? I'm just a dude who enjoys watching it and decided to make a little podcast about it. That's going to wrap up this episode then of 40 Minutes of Hell. Going to go ahead and throw this thing up there before that Boston and Bucks game begins, so that by the time the game is done, if you listen to it, you could tweet at me and just be like, Joseph, you are a grade A moron for what you were saying. Which I'm sure I am. Whatever. I am your friend Joseph Craven on behalf of all of those who helped me out with 40 Minutes of Hell, including my co-host tonight, Radar O'Reilly, who is currently chewing on a pig ear in the living room and living her best life. I will see you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode. And hopefully, we'll have more of these episodes coming up in the near future as my home office is in great shape and as my employment, my full-time, my day job allows me for maybe a little bit more time to sit down and do some of the stuff, the fun stuff that I enjoy doing, such as speaking into a computer screen about the NBA.